Boundaries can be thought of as an imaginary line between you and others that distinguish what belongs to you from what doesn't, and applies not only to your possessions, your money, your body, but also to your thoughts and your feelings and your needs. And it can be really helpful to think about your boundaries as your bottom line, because our boundaries are the limits that we set and adhere to in our relationships that define what we are willing to accept and what we're willing to do. And they're based on usually very unspoken truths or, principles that you live by. What you will and won't participate in, and what you will or will not allow for yourself in different areas of your life. Sometimes our needs and interests coincide with other people's, but often they don't. And personal boundaries will really affirm where you end and where another person begins, and then making it possible for you to separate your own needs and interests from others. This really equips you to take responsibility for what you think, feel, do, and do not take responsibility for what others think, feel, and do. If you feel resentful or victimized and are blaming someone or something, it may mean that you haven't been setting healthy boundaries for yourself. There are 3 different types of personal boundaries. One is material boundaries. It can relate to when we give or lend things, money, clothes, food, whatever. Then there's physical boundaries, pertain to our physical space, our privacy, our body. It definitely includes our needs and rights in regards to, sexual touch and activity, what, where, when, and with whom. You have emotional boundaries, and those set our emotional needs and rights, and they distinguish our emotional responses and responsibility for them from someone else's. Emotional boundaries are also, how we allocate our time and energy and how we spend it and with whom. There's 4 different kinds of interpersonal boundaries, like different styles. The first one being soft or weak. People with soft or weak boundaries are essentially unprotected, and they have difficulty defining and asserting their own rights and confuse their responsibilities with others. It's as if there's nothing really separating them from others, and they share too much too soon. But I never saw my vulnerability as weakness, but everybody says it's so people can use you. But the people that try to use me seem to know me the least, because if they really knew me, they'd know I'm a tough cookie. And, people with weak boundaries tend to be highly emotional and reactive, and are vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. And the second one is rigid and inflexible. People who are so closed off so nobody can get close to them, either physically or emotionally. They're very overprotected, invested in protecting themselves at all costs, and they have very rigid boundaries, like a brick wall. Nothing can get in, nothing can get out. And this is often the case if somebody's been physically or emotionally abused. The third one is permeable or porous. You know, it's a combination of weak and rigid boundaries. Next, there's permeable and porous. They have a combination of weak and then rigid boundaries. People with permeable boundaries are unsure of what to let in and what to keep out, and as a result, the boundaries are set and enforced inconsistently. Then there's flexible and healthy, and people effectively protect the person who has them. The person chooses what to let in and what to keep out on a situation specific case-by-case basis. People with flexible, healthy boundaries are difficult to manipulate or exploit and really form the foundation of healthy relationships. A lot of people will think that I have weak boundaries, but I'm just naturally an overgiver. I'm a nurturer. I definitely know how to say no when I don't want to do something, and I definitely will, put my foot down when need be. Even if I'm in a mood and I don't want to do something, like, no, I ain't doing it, sorry. Now, which of these 4 styles would you think most accurately describes your own personal boundaries? Because boundaries are learned. If people in your family had weak or rigid boundaries, then your ability to develop healthy boundaries was limited. Any form of abuse violates personal boundaries, including name-calling, put-downs, teasing, guilt-tripping, any other manipulations that, are subtle to coerce people into doing what they want or what they don't want to do, are also, boundary violations. When such experiences occur over time, particularly during childhood, but it was a lifelong thing. The ability of people to understand that they have a right to their own boundaries is adversely affected and often long into adulthood. And if your boundaries weren't respected growing up, you may not know how to assert them or even believe in your right to them. However, your virtue of just being human, you have many rights. And among others, you have the right to say no, to be addressed with courtesy and respect, to your privacy, to change your mind, to ask for help, to be left alone, and to conserve your energy and not spread yourself too thin, which is exactly what I'm doing. Having a timeout. So I thought it'd be a good time to make a video about boundaries. Because I know when I get crabby, I'm just like when I reach a certain point, I just can't be around people. And I need, either 20 minutes, just laying down, or, as much time as I possibly can get, just, being alone. And most likely outside. So, moving toward healthier, more effective boundaries, it's not unusual for people to say that they've previously tried to set boundaries with others and it didn't work and nothing changed. And attempting to set boundaries in anger or nagging makes them much less likely to be heard or even respected. It's valuable to keep in mind that setting and enforcing boundaries is not meant to punish anyone, and rather, healthy boundaries are for your well-being and protection as well as the other person. When you set boundaries with others, it's important to do it in a very matter-of-fact and very respectful way as possible. It's helpful to be clear and firm, with regard to what you will and won't accept. And neither long explanations nor justifications are necessary. Your responsibility is to communicate your boundaries. You're not responsible for the other person's reaction to the boundaries you set. If it upsets him or her, that it's his or her responsibility. When you set boundaries with people who are controlling or manipulative or simply unaccustomed to it, you can expect them to definitely test the new boundaries and be prepared to communicate the potential consequences and the actions you will take, if the other person violates the boundaries you've set. And it's the most important with the follow-through. And when you communicate consequences, you need to be ready to follow through on them as necessary. This is a situation where it's essential that what you say is consistent with what you do. And if the boundaries you set are ignored, tested, or otherwise violated, and you don't follow through on consequences that you've communicated, the other person learns your words are meaningless, and they will even more likely to disrespect any boundaries you do set. If your behavior doesn't match the boundaries you set, like if you don't practice what you preach, which I do that sometimes. We all have our moments. You send mixed signals that confuse and undermine your boundaries. And this also makes it less likely that your boundaries will be respected. And many people, setting boundaries is very new or uncomfortable, or feel anxious or guilty, and this is natural and normal. And learning to set and stick to healthy boundaries is absolutely a process. It takes practice and it takes support. And you got to work on developing a support system of people who appreciate and respect your right to assert your boundaries. It frequently takes encouragement to make yourself and your needs a priority and to persist, especially in the face of pushback from those, who you are setting boundaries. There are many benefits of establishing healthy boundaries. When others try to blame you for something that isn't your responsibility, instead of apologizing or arguing or needing to defend yourself, whether out loud or just to yourself, say, I refuse to take responsibility for that. And with practice, this becomes easier and more comfortable. And you will experience greater self-respect and receive more respect from others, and find that your relationships generally improve. And enforcing boundaries isn't selfish, it is self-care. And that is the most important thing I've learned this past year, is just self-care, setting boundaries, keeping boundaries, definitely self-possession, knowing who you are and what you will tolerate and what you won't.